You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Well, let's dive head first into the discussion of what is the nature of our reality. There's really two big schools of thoughts that often pass here through the show, and one is that our reality has been hijacked in some way, and this is where the nefarious aspects come in and the pieces that don't fit together, and right. That we could have a different type of reality if those layers of awareness were peeled away, and we could see the entities that are manipulating and causing us to have the dark side, if you will. And there's others that believe that dark side is part of our growing and learning experience here, that it's supposed to be that way, that we couldn't evolve if we didn't have the duality here. And I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, let's do it backwards. There's no duality. Everything is a pressure gradient. In other words, when you have a high pressure, something pushing, it's going to move in the direction where there's less push. If you have two things that are pushing equally, there's no movement. So the duality that we call duality is really a pressure movement. Once you understand that, we can get into what gravity really is and how the human body works and thoughts and all that. The other thing I want to mention, hijacking. Okay, very simple. The hijackees are going along with it. Give you an example. Years ago, we've heard stories of freight trains of prisoners, thousands of prisoners on freight trains being moved to a prison camp with only 5 guards. Even if they have machine guns, so what? Overtake them. So what happened was they were able to have 5 people corral 20,000 people into a dark place, and the people doing that, the hijackers, said they must be subhuman because there's only 5 of us and 20,000 of them, and they feel helpless. Why don't like 50 of them jump the guards? Okay, so you sacrifice yourself, so what? Bacteria and yeast do that all the time. They sacrifice members of the colony so the rest of the colony preserves. So, in other words, those that have hijacked with such small numbers and small impetus are looking at the results and saying, we're probably doing the right thing because look how many of them there are and how few of us, and they're going along with it.
Right.
So I will never blame the quote-unquote elites or the system, because I'll tell you for sure, this is through rational reason, statistics, history. Imagine the most evil dictatorship. It won't last for 3 days if the people don't go along with it. The majority of the people don't go along with it, right? Right. So I don't see the hijacking aspect. I think that the hijackers are more like opportunists, right? They've recognized that the people are apathetic, indifferent, whatever, and ignorant, and they rely on the people's ignorance, and people are very reliable, unfortunately. So, and that's how I see it. So yes, the hijacking term and the duality term, those things are used often. The simulation, simulacrum, simulacrum, all that stuff is used. And yes, it's a method. We can talk about how to technically access reasoning to that. But before we get into a duality, the only time you'll find duality, there are 2 races on the planet. This includes animals as well, male and female. If, for example, if you take all of the different races, green, blue, yellow, black, red, whatever you want to see, all the males have more in common than they do with any of the females, regardless of your. So there are actually 2 races. Anyone who's been in a relationship knows they're very, from physical appearance to the hormones, the chemistry, the thoughts. So those are the 2 races. So when I talk about race, I have to distinguish, because if we get into some of the quote-unquote medical, I want to distinguish that as well.
Let's go to a little bit further into the dynamics behind why we just allow ourselves to be corralled into this false reality.
Well, I'll tell you, it's how false is it? I'll give you an example. Back in the 60s, I had a grandmother come over from Greece, and she was watching on the television a black and white version of cowboys and Indians, and the cowboys were shooting the Indians and on TV, and she was crying at how people were dying on the television, right? She actually thought people were being shot, right, and dying. And usually she came from an old world country. When you see people dying, it's a very sad thing. So it was real to her because she didn't know. Here's another example. You have these huge skyscrapers with 4-inch thick steel, whatever, and they tell the people that 19 Arab hijackers with box cutters vaporized the World Trade Center, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty real. And people say, well, that's not the official story, Greg. Because, you know, give me the official story. Tell me if that makes any more sense. You see, so it doesn't have to make sense for it to be real to people. You see?
Right, right. Now, earlier you had brought up the concept of NPCs and this simulated type of reality. Is that what we are dealing with? Is this a simulation for consciousness evolution? Is this something that we could have possibly created for ourselves? And do you really think that most of the people that we surround ourselves with on a daily basis don't really have what you would call a divine spark?
The divine spark is there. I'll give you an example. You see all this destruction going on, for example, in real life, and also you see it depicted in fiction. You know how fiction depicts real life and vice versa sometimes. They have these things, back in the days before CGI, they had movie sets. They built a miniature city and they blew it up, right? It was a scaled version, right? And it was done for an effect, simply just as that, right? Now, if we go back to the divine spark, if you start looking at the various layers, what is real, like for example, someone who never doesn't understand the concept of television, Hollywood, and scripts, and people dying in a theatrical mode thinks that it's real. That's real to them. Then there's another layer where that has to copy what it really goes on when people are dying to a certain extent, right? And then there's another layer to that. Why are people dying, right? So there's many levels of truth. When I say NPC, that's just a popular catch term now that people understand. Mm-hmm. One of the most popular catch terms that you hear now is they're awake. People are waking up. Right. And I'm telling you, it doesn't make a hell of a difference. Why? Okay, let's just use some pejoratives here. If you go to sleep stupid, guess what? You're going to wake up what? You're going to wake up stupid also. Mm-hmm. So in other words, if you lack certain knowledge, technique, or abilities, it doesn't matter if you're awake or asleep. Right? The thing is waking up and doing what? Accessing what you can, you see.
So you believe that we will always have these varying levels of deceiving ourselves into this false reality?
Allowing. You see, there's no such thing as human nature. You're bred into it. I'll give you an example. We are a type of being that comes into the world with no downloads. Where all the animals tend to do that. Give you an example. This is an example I've been giving for 3 decades. Take a puppy dog, just been born from the litter, and immediately hand it over to some apes in the jungle to raise it. After a few years, you adapt that puppy dog, which is now a full-grown dog, and it'll chase a stick, it'll bark, it'll run after things, just like as if you raised it, right? Very simple. You couldn't tell that the dog was raised by gorillas. Now, if you take a human after a few weeks and it's raised by gorillas, when it's, let's say, adolescent or mature, bring that human into your house, first thing he's going to do is run into your kitchen table and poop right on it and try to swing from the chandelier. So why do all the other animals have these instinctive downloads? For example, if you raise cats, they're little tiny cats. After they eat, they all groom themselves in synchronous fashion. They do things. No one ever showed them that. Their language is already downloaded. So we were kind of like, imagine getting a bare computer with just a hard drive, no operating system, no programs, and no files, right? Because that's the order, right? You need an operating system, then you need the programming, and then you need the files. If you have no operating system and you try to put files in, it's never going to accept them, right? And it will not accept the program. So you have to have an operating system. The operating system is the culture that you're raised in, right? The actual culture. Right. You have various cultures. Eastern, Western is the biggest division, right? And then you have the programs, which are basically your localities and familial life, and then the files are your personal experiences. And the computer is a wonderful analogy for how the human mind works. So I want to get into some minor details, shotgun steamrolling type stuff that I usually it's called Greek speak. It's been dubbed. Really basic stuff. Yeah. If there's something called home base, that everything emanates from the HQ, headquarters, right?